Thanatophobia. From the Greek words thanatos meaning death and phobos meaning fear. I have always been terrified of death. Thanatophobia is an intense fear about the dying process or death itself. When I was a kid, I would have full-blown panic attacks over it. They must have started when I was 5 or 6, and they continued on for a really long time. I simply couldn't bear with the idea of an eternity in the void. I have never been particularly religious, but the idea of heaven didn't sit right with me either. I thought existing forever in a realm where everything is perfect all the time would be incredibly tedious and dreadful. If I thought about heaven for too long late at night, my heart would begin to race, my sweat would be freezing cold, and I would scream, begging to be saved from the inevitable. This anxiety of mine is something that makes me feel isolated and different. I have never heard or seen anyone in real life with a phobia like mine, or at least to the extent mine had at its peak. For the longest time, I believed I was alone with a fear like this. A fear I pretend isn't even there, that I avoid talking about, and that I would never thought I would see accurately depicted in a form of art. Until today. Beloved by fans, alternate reality games, or ARGs, took the world of internet horror by storm. This corner of the internet was full of what many would consider to be modern horror classics. But if I'm being honest, a part of me always felt like, without a handful of exceptions, this genre has always been a saturated mess full of cliches. So naturally, I never thought I would be making a video on an ARG, more specifically, an Animal Crossing one. See, despite what you might initially assume, the Animal Crossing franchise is no stranger to creepy Easter eggs and urban legends, the Brutus hoax, the 3:33 AM alien broadcast, the mystery of Zipper T Bunny, and much more. This ARG challenged everything I thought modern internet horror could be. It goes beyond scary jumpscares with sunken eyes under a VHS filter. It is a melancholic, atmospheric, and blurry childhood memory. The kind of memory that is better off being forgotten. This ARG did something to me that a horror story hasn't been able to do for a long time. It disturbed me. And it didn't do it with a creepy, censored, stretched out face. All it had to do was to remind me about a truth I don't like thinking about. Death is inevitable. My name is Astrei, and tonight we will explore the obscure Animal Crossing Wild World OST, an ARG where all of its videos are currently unlisted, which means they are impossible to be watched through normal means. This is a rabbit hole about fearing death and how cults take advantage of vulnerable people. So, turn the lights off, grab a plushie and get comfy in your bed. Or sit tight while eating Uber Eats, I guess. And let's talk about the ARG that made my thanatophobia resurface. This is the story of a boy who didn't want to die. But before that, did you know that only 1.4% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed? If you'd like to watch more videos like this one and help me beat the dollar store Nexpo allegations, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Videos like these take a long time to make. In fact, this video script is 12,000 words long. So yes, it's been a while since I've last seen sunlight. With that out of the way, let's begin. Some nights ago, I couldn't fall asleep. Even if my body and mind were exhausted, my insomnia wasn't ready to have me drift off and sleep. So, because I am a Gen Z boy with the attention span of a fish, I pulled out my phone to watch something on YouTube. There, I found myself watching Animal Crossing videos. For those unaware, Animal Crossing is one of my favorite game franchises. There is something so magical about the series that makes me forget all about my problems. Whether it be a rough breakup, the burden of adult life, or something as simple as a bad day, this silly game about animals living in a small town always seems to cheer me up. After a while, I found a strange video in my recommended tab. It was an Animal Crossing track from Wild World titled 0 AM, which immediately caught my eye. Those who are not familiar with the franchise might not find anything of note here. It looks like a regular re-uploaded song from a Nintendo video game. But if you're a fan, you can tell something is off. See, Animal Crossing has hourly music that plays through the course of the day, i.e. 1 PM, 2 PM, 3 PM, and so on until we reach midnight. Tracks that play at midnight are always titled 12 AM as opposed to 0 AM. Believing this was some sort of secret or alternative track, I gave it a listen. The 0 AM track felt oddly distant and dreamlike. I had never heard it before, despite being a fan of the franchise. I hadn't heard it in-game, nor in the background of a Scott the Boss video. And I couldn't even recall seeing this video getting recommended to me before, as it barely had a couple thousand views at the time. And upon reading the description, I was even more confused. This song was apparently an in-game recording, its title was fan-made, and it was yet to be found in the files of the game. What was the deal with the 0 AM theme? Could it be that I had found a lost Animal Crossing track by complete accident? Nothing about it made sense, and the comments didn't help either, as there were plenty of people talking about their childhood memories with the song, making me even more confused. The uploader is a channel called Sepiatone, so I checked their channel and found more of these Wild World OST track re-uploads, only to see that their titles became stranger as time went on. Curiosity got the better of me, and I watched each and every one of these videos from beginning to end. Now that you and I are on the same page as to how I found this ARG, we will go over every track, analyze their contents, and try to piece together the hidden story behind these uploads. The Animal Crossing Wild World Obscure OST is a series of 28 videos that are currently unlisted, and the 29th one that was just uploaded. I haven't seen anyone on YouTube talk about this yet, so keep in mind that this is just my current interpretation of the story, which could change depending on if we, together, find new clues and leads to solve the Wild World OST mystery. I saw someone predicting that this ARG was going to blow up soon, and they commented such a fire title that I'm probably going to plagiarize it, so thank you. We have already analyzed the 0 AM video, something that seems to be a re-uploaded track with official Wild World images accompanying it. These uploads are very reminiscent of the average YouTube video from the early 2000s. Like really, this could totally pass off as something I would have watched during computer class in elementary school. Every single one of these videos has the same description. This song has yet to be found in the files of the game. It is from an in-game recording, along with a personalized message that is different in every upload. In this case, the note on 0 AM says, "Note, update. All titles are fan-made, undetermined when this song plays." Based on that information, we can make our first assumption. The poster of this videos is an outsider to this mystery too, and they are simply sharing these strange songs for unknown purposes, while being unaware of their origins and nature. The second track that Sepiatone posted is titled Abandoned House. The same disclaimers are present in the video's description. Abandoned House is the unofficial title. The song is an in-game recording, and it hasn't been found in the files of the game yet. The fact that this song is titled Abandoned House would naturally make you believe that this track has a chance of playing after a villager moves out, which is a normal Animal Crossing feature. But the note under the video specifically states, plays in an animal's house when they disappear, which means the villagers don't simply leave, they go missing. This disturbing implication only gets worse when reaching the middle point of the track, where we start hearing whispers and low-pitched murmurs. Why are the villagers disappearing? Do they simply get tired of living in your town? Or is there something more sinister going on? The third song is titled Game Over and is accompanied by the usual disclaimers, which is really weird to think about because how could this ever be an in-game recording if Animal Crossing has never had a game over screen in the franchise before? This mechanic, along with villagers that suddenly disappear, are not normal occurrences. And because Animal Crossing is a game about daily life, wouldn't a game over screen imply death? This song is intense, it feels like impending doom. It reminds me of the malware creepypastas from just some years ago. Interestingly, this video is not a slideshow compared to its predecessors. It is simply an image of the Wild World cover that progressively gets bigger. What happens next caught me completely off guard. Distorted noises that sound like screams. The note under this video says that the game over screen can be accessed via rare Scorpion Sting events or being caught by the Nightly Visitor. Who is the Nightly Visitor? If getting stung by a scorpion causes a game over in a life simulator, we can assume these to be fatal. Therefore, whoever the Nightly Visitor is an extremely dangerous entity. Why is such an ominous figure that can kill the player part of an innocent game about talking animals? And an even stranger implication, Could it be that the reason that villagers are going missing is because they quote-unquote get caught by the nightly visitor? If that is the case, then those screams from earlier make a lot more sense. The fourth track, titled Waterfall Room, starts off with a bit crushed droning noise, followed by an out-of-tune melody with very awkward pauses in between, very feverish. After the second loop of notes plays, a long silence follows, and when the progression is over, the slideshow cuts to an image. A player, a boy with brown hair looking at a river with his back facing the town's waterfall. The note says, "Sorry about the footsteps," which can be heard at the 1 minute and 40-second mark. In the last frame of the video, we quickly get a glimpse of a text box that states, "How to get to the waterfall dungeon, step 1, as if it were some form of tutorial, which we don't get to see as it suddenly cuts off. This video, despite not saying it outright, provides a ton of valuable information. We are aware that this playlist contains music from non-existent in-game mechanics. There's no game over screens or cryptic nightly visitors in regular versions of Wild World. But now, we are also seeing non-existent locations. See, every Animal Crossing town in Wild World contains a waterfall, which exists as part of the landscape only, with no hidden pathways to access a supposedly secret waterfall room that exists behind it. But once again, the description states that the song comes from an in-game recording. Since we actually get to hear footsteps along with the music, we can confirm that the poster is at least being truthful about these songs being in-game recordings. No one in their sane mind would purposefully lower the listening experience of the viewer, which implies that, in some way, they have access to a playable version or recordings of this morbid Wild World game. Also, this is not super relevant at the moment, but please pay attention to the position of the villager in the foreground. Despite the video being titled Waterfall Room, the villager is facing away from the waterfall, almost as if they were avoiding looking directly at it. Funeral is the next song. This track doesn't even contain a note in the description. It is very slow and creepy, almost as if the notes were being played backwards. This song would be the third to have some correlation to death. Based on context clues, it would make sense for this track to play when a villager dies, which would explain the abandoned house phenomenon. Alternatively, Funeral could play at the credit scene after a player gets a game over, aka interactions with dangerous entities that result in death. There is not much left to say, but I have an interesting observation regarding the video that preceded Funeral. The last video, Waterfall Room, ended right after teasing the first step on how to enter the Waterfall dungeon, which cuts off, and with autoplay enabled, Funeral plays immediately after the supposed first step. It almost makes it seem as if trying to access the Waterfall Room will result in death. Found is the most disturbing track thus far. The description states, "Note, place in the graveyard." I can't really explain whatever is going on here, so here's the clip. This song is mostly clacking noises, then distorted sounds. 45 seconds in, an alarm loudly goes off at the very last second. So, why is this song titled Found? The word found implies that something is looking for you, which is exactly what the nightly visitor does. It catches the player. And if the song is played in the graveyard specifically, we could assume that the nightly visitor resides there and kills those who dare enter and behaves as some kind of Grim Reaper. Or that the player was grave robbing and found some cool bones. I would much rather it be the former. I also think it's worth mentioning that these videos typically have the title of the track written in yellow at the very beginning of each video, but this one has no title written in the beginning at all. Final Hour is the fifth video in the playlist. It feels like a reprise of Funeral, except less moody and with an oddly optimistic tune halfway through it. The description's note says, "Random chance when everyone disappears." We know about the abandoned house epidemic and villagers going missing, So it seems like the player will gradually have less and less animals present in their town. Whether it be for fatal or unrelated reasons, we don't know yet. Once the player is completely alone, aka when everyone disappears, this song has a random chance of playing. This track is tonally very different from the rest, contrasting heavily with the somber tunes we heard previously, yet the title is still Final Hour. The optimism of the song feels weirdly anticipatory or celebratory in some way, almost as if the player was looking forward at a final hour coming. Is the player embracing death? Why would anyone look forward to something like this? Here is where things truly get interesting. What even is the final hour? Other than the obvious assumption that, well, these are a person's final hours before death, in the Abrahamic religions, aka Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the term final hour is typically associated to the Day of Judgment, a mass-scale event where God or a prophetic figure will return to mankind to judge the living and death alike, resulting in the salvation of many and a guaranteed spot in heaven or eternal damnation in hell. Or, their respective equivalents. Right now, I want to focus on how Christianity interprets the event. In the Bible, the final hours refers to a period in time that happens right before the second coming of Jesus Christ. In the book of Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, on verse 12:36, it is stated, "But I say unto you, that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned." In the case of John 2:18, we read, "Little children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come, by which we know that it is the last hour." From what I researched, I believe this verse might be saying that the final moments before Jesus returns, the earth will have sunken into great degeneracy, with many evildoers and fake prophets rising. Now, this event is sometimes referred to as the rapture by some people, when in reality these two are completely different events. The word rapture is actually not even in the Bible. It comes from the Latin word rapturo, which means caught up, and refers to a separate event when Jesus will make Christians ascend to heaven before a 7-year-long period of chaos known as the tribulation. Think of the rapture as a form of rescue that happens before a bomb is dropped, being the Day of Judgment. According to Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 17, "Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord." So, based on the religious connections to the titles of the Wild World OST playlist, we can change the way we look at the villagers' disappearances. Because this song plays when all of the villagers have disappeared and the player is ecstatically waiting for their final hour, then that means that the most likely cause for the disappearances is that the villagers have ascended to heaven one by one in the rapture. And it is only a matter of time before the player is taken too. And going back to the silence and screaming at the end of the melody, I assume it means that the player was judged by God in this event, but they were not worthy of the kingdom of heaven, so instead of receiving salvation, they are damned and will descend to hell. Interestingly, a thunder can be heard as well, which, comes from the sky, the most typical depiction of heaven. But why would heaven-like symbolism be present if we are hearing the player getting dragged into hell? The next video is straight out of a nightmare. No description, no music. This is Untitled. This is presented like a movie maker video slideshow with rapidly flashing text. I can't quite make it out. Its long hair briefly hovers over my neck as if to gesture. What are you looking at? I turn around to see it bending over my head. Its breath burns my face off. I turn around. It's black hair in my face. It wants me to turn around. Of course it does. If I turn around, I am going to die. I turn around. I can see its arms hugging the wall. The holes where its eyes should be are boring past my skin into my skull. It wants me to turn around. Of course it does. It wants me to turn around. It wants me to turn around. It wants me to turn around. Both of its hands land on my shoulder in perfect timing. This phrase is repeated and the video goes back to having the Wild World cover as the background. This video actually scared me. Even if the "I am going to die and can't turn around" text is a little cliche, it is absolutely blood-chilling given the context. It is like a digital manifestation of absolute dread and panic. The tacky and flashy imagery of the 2000s paired with such gruesome text and unearthly music, it is horrifying. So, now that we have watched the Untitled video, we can answer some of the most important questions that we left unanswered earlier. I believe that this video is a sort of transcript of an event where something is chasing the player down as if they were about to die. This entity obviously being the nightly visitor, giving the similar noises from the found video. As far as we know, the nightly visitor is something that is actively trying to hunt the player down, and maybe other villagers as well. Being caught results in fatal wounds, causing the player to get a game over. The prevalence of not wanting to turn around give us essential insight as to how the nightly visitor operates. It sneaks up to players during late hours of the night. Getting caught by it will make the player get holes bored, a synonym for drilling or carving, directly into their face. Looking at it will result in death. This might be a bit of a reach, but I feel this might be a good time to return to the Waterfall room video. Do you remember how I brought up that the player wasn't directly facing the waterfall even if the video was about the waterfall itself? Pair this with the strange footsteps we can hear in the background, and it almost makes me think that the player is walking away from the waterfall. Could it be that trying to access the waterfall room was what kickstarted the nightly visitor to be freed? Almost as if the waterfall room served as a sort of Pandora's box that led to the causation of these strange occurrences? I am not sure at all. And given what we know, the nightly visitor, 1, only stalks at night, and this picture clearly shows its daytime, and 2, it typically lurks in the graveyard. But what is even weirder than that, given what we heard in the previous track, wasn't the player present during the Rapture/Judgment Day? We heard in Final Hour that the player did not make it to heaven and was damned to go to hell. So, if the player died and went to hell after the failed Ascension, how are they dying again to a whole different thing? I actually think that the Untitled video and the Final Hours track might actually be two events happening simultaneously, which would mean that our earlier theory that the nightly visitor might be a Grim Reaper of some kind or an agent of death could be correct then. It has some natural capabilities, a very gruesome, monster-like appearance, and killed the player who just died in the previous track. In other words, and to clarify what I mean, Untitled is the POV of the player right when they got caught, which takes place during the screaming section of the Final Hours video. The next video is titled Church, yet for some reason the slideshow refers to it as Midnight Ceremony, showing some discrepancy between the video and the poster, which once again brings us back to the unreliability of the poster's knowledge about these events. The description note says, "It is always too late to attend service. You can sneak in, but that's a bad idea." We hear about a new location that is not available in the normal version of Wild World. We now know that a waterfall room, a graveyard, and a church exist in some capacity in this save file. At the end of the video, the cover of the game fades into a strange villager's wiki we haven't seen before. A villager that doesn't actually exist. His name is Bell. He seems to be a grey ram with yellow eyes, a weird smirk, and a robe with a cross around his neck. His service is church priest, and his picture/quote says, "God is such a forgiven being." Wouldn't you agree? This further cements the Christian faith connection to the Wild World OST I brought up in the Final Hour segment. Now that we see that there is an entire NPC dedicated to this apocalyptic side of the game, we are now fully certain that this copy of Animal Crossing is about to go through its Judgment Day. But who is Bell? We still don't know much about Bell. But let's talk about his species. In the Bible, rams are symbols of wisdom and sacrifice, with one of the most iconic depictions of them being present in the Genesis, where God instructs Abraham to kill his son Isaac to test his faith. Right before he is about to kill his son, God abruptly stops him and demands a ram be sacrificed instead. Interestingly, in Christian art and culture, rams and goats have been associated with evil and the devil, which is why we typically see them in satanic symbols like the pentagram or Baphomet. There are many factors as to why this belief came into being, but one of the most influential and discreet ones might have originated from Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement ritual from Leviticus. It tells the tale of two goats which were going to be sacrificed in the name of God, with one of them, the Azazel goat, being selected by a man named Lot. This goat would symbolically bear the sins of the Jewish community. Despite goats and rams not being directly evil animals in the Bible, their association with sin might have shifted the public's cognition of them, leading to them being adopted as satanic imagery to counter Christian institutions. So, astrei, why are you even talking about goats in the first place? As I mentioned earlier, this version of Wild World is going through its Judgment Day, and just how we established earlier, these final hours before Judgment are predicted to be full of sin, degeneracy, and fake prophets claiming to be Christ. Jesus is often depicted as a sheep in Christian art and theology, which is interesting considering that both sheep and rams are referred to as lambs when they are still young. There is not a lot we know about the church nor Bel, but given this eerie coincidence, Bel might be the prophesied Antichrist, or at the very least, not using the church with the best of intentions. This is especially clear if we re-listen to the Final Hours track, where its optimistic theme seems a little out of place given the motif of death, unless it was embracing it. I propose the following. Could it be that Bel is running a death cult? Ascension, the next song up, is a saturated, trippy, almost alien track, as it has no predictable pattern. Ascension does not have a description either, but its title seems to confirm everything we've theorized thus far. Because the bio says that this is an in-game recording, we could assume that the Ascension track plays after the Final Hours theme, as the player is experiencing the rapture / God's judgment after the disappearance of his villagers. At the 44-second mark, we hear loud banging, which progressively gets more violent, fast, and deafening. Why is nobody else here? This quote implies that the player realized they were alone in the afterlife. Whether it be heaven or hell, this thought is horrifying. An eternity of inescapable isolation and silence. Alternatively, this line could imply that the villager missed the rapture and is frantically looking for their villagers on Earth. Villagers they'll never see again, as they are now part of the great beyond. This is a ghost town, or I guess, a ghost world. Why did God take everyone but the player? Either of these paths are equally horrifying. The playlist suddenly changes. This is the most Animal Crossing-esque song yet, titled Bankruptcy, with the description note being, support your local businesses. The video starts off with the DS's cover of Wild World, only to show another image. This screenshot contains the same player from the Waterfall room video. They are standing by themselves in an empty room with a text bubble that says, "He didn't even lock the door," implying that whoever lived here disappeared so suddenly they didn't have time or cared about doing the typical goodbye spiel. However, once I took a closer look, I realized that this room does not actually belong to a normal villager. Rather, and very appropriate to the title, this is actually Tom Nook's shop, now completely empty. Since Nook isn't here and the title is Bankruptcy, which happens when a business is no longer profitable, we can assume that there are no more villagers left to purchase items, meaning that the player is left as the only person in the world who did not experience the rapture. As far as we know, everyone else has ascended to heaven but them. Player Grave is the 12th video in the playlist. The description's note says, random chance while mourning a player's grave. At the 30-second mark, the slideshow fades into a photograph of the player we saw in the Waterfall room and Bankruptcy videos. The player is apparently called David. He came from a town called Fairway, his favorite villager was Lucky, he played for 562 days, 13 hours and 1 minute. His final words were, "I do not want to go to heaven." May he rest in peace. At the 57-second mark, David's portrait shifts, and it turns into the face that gyroids typically possess. This face is also similar to Coco's, who is greatly associated to death and funerary services. At 1 minute 17 seconds in, the music fades and we silently stare at this dead player's data being slowly transformed into crosses, totaling 64 in total. I Do Not Want to Go to Heaven was particularly difficult for me to read. This ERG is more than a simple story of spooky monsters and cults. It is about a boy who was afraid to die. I remember that when I was a little kid and started dealing with these phobias, I would tell my mom something very similar, as my mind was still too young to compute my own mortality despite being aware of it. Living with these phobias is a lose-lose scenario, as being alive feels claustrophobic, as you have to live with the knowledge of impending doom, all the while death does not provide any relief for these feelings whatsoever. Let's revisit the Untitled video. I turn around. I can see its arms hugging the wall. The holes where its eyes should be are boring past my skin into my skull. David's face is hollowed out. It has no eyes or mouth. All of his facial features have been carved out, confirming that he was a victim of the nightly visitor. Interestingly, in the original Animal Crossing game, which originally released for the N64 in Japan, if a player quits the game without saving after visiting another player's town, this would also happen to their face, which seems oddly appropriate given the number of crosses displayed earlier. Hey everyone, Astrei from the future here. We're now at the 31-minute mark of the video, so if you're enjoying it, and if you still haven't, please leave a like and subscribe. That's it, that's enough spam, let's continue. The next video on the playlist is Player's Grave again. It has the same title, description, music, the same information about David. It almost feels as if this video was posted twice until this happens. Everything has been wiped out. No info, no name, no music. The only thing we have left is deafening silence paired with David's character model with a cross for a face. Why are there two versions of the video, and why is his face a cross this time? While this ERG was still running, Sepiatone's Wild World OST playlist would be updated every now and then. Sometimes new tracks would be added onto the playlist, but other times the playlist wouldn't even add or subtract any videos. The only thing different would be the contents of the Player's Grave video, which would change, almost as if it got updated as time went on. The Player's Grave video would update multiple times through the course of the ARG. This video obviously did not mutate magically. There are several videos titled Player's Grave with the same bio, but over time, each Player Grave video would be replaced by another Player's Grave video with different contents. Each time this happened, the previous version of the Player's Grave would become unlisted or unavailable, giving the illusion that the video was evolving over time. So, now that we understand what the deal is with the Player Graves videos, let's go back to our most important question. Why is David's face a cross, instead of being the gyroid face or his regular human face? This cross looks very out of place considering that our current theory is that David went to hell. That's why he was violently screaming during the final hours and Ascension songs. He screamed because the Grim Reaper, aka the nightly visitor, was dragging him down. But what if I told you that David never actually went to hell? He successfully entered heaven and his soul was saved, which is exactly what made him scream. David feared paradise because there was no one else there. Based on his final words, one might pick up the thanatophobic implications, but there is a specific fear of heaven named uranophobia, from the Greek uran meaning sky and phobia meaning fear respectively. This is a phobia where those affected have an irrational fear of the sky, heaven, or eternal life, which I like to think is a very childlike way of perceiving oblivion. The cross on David's face shows us that his soul was saved, but why would heaven be empty, and why would he scream in pure horror? Church Prayer is the 13th video on the playlist and goes back to the typical format we've come to expect. with the descriptions note saying, placed during a church service prayer. To anybody who ascended last night, can you tell us if you got anything cool out of it? Like furniture or something? The video fades into a screenshot of the church for the very first time, where we see David among a group of silhouettes, implying this event took place before the Day of Judgment / the Rapture, considering there are plenty of villagers here before they went missing. There is also a speech bubble from the Ram Priest Bell saying, "Let us have a moment of prayer." Therefore, we can assume that the "to anybody who ascended last night" note is most likely one of Bell's lines. The fact that he is preaching to the dead directly almost makes it seem like he has some sort of supernatural capabilities as a medium. At the 50-second mark, the slideshow fades into another image, one where Bell isn't talking and less villagers are present. The video slowly zooms into David and then the screen fades to white. I believe that the disappearances of the shadowy villagers imply the following. There are less and less villagers present in the second screenshot because more of them have ascended to heaven, showing us a glimpse at how gradual the disappearances occurred and how they will continue until no one is left in town. Why are the villagers silhouettes anyway? I believe that these shadows could support the theory that the church is actually a death cult. The attendees of the church are hiding themselves or keeping their identity in the dark from each other, which is a common trope in media about cults. This is visually represented by them looking like shadows. Now, I think this is what the sneaking in line we read about in the description of the church video would actually be referring to. The only way for you to sneak in is to keep your identity a secret rather than actually sneaking in. This makes sense, as sneaking in is considered to be a bad idea, as doing so would be a very risky, high-stakes choice. If this really is a death cult, who knows which kind of depraved acts could the attendees be partaking in? But that raises a question. If so, why isn't David hiding? At the moment, we're not fully sure, but I propose the following. Maybe David was hoping that prayer would solve his fear of death and devoted himself to the church in such an extreme degree where he gradually became a more prominent figure of the church to the point where it wasn't even necessary for him to hide anymore. If David became a high-ranking member, that would also mean that he developed a deeper bond with Bell. Plus, the fact that, considering that at some point every single villager will have ascended before David, there would be a period in time where the only two people left in town would be Bell and David. In both screenshots, the camera zooms into David, implying it is only a matter of time before the previously mentioned ascension occurs, supported by the video fading into the color white, a very deliberate choice for a transition. This is the third iteration of Player's Grave. Once this video was uploaded, the other two had become unlisted. This video has the same bio that the original Player's Grave video had. The video itself has the phrase, "It's time to go. Please speak into the mic." This might be an audio recording of David's microphone before uttering the words, "I don't want to go to heaven." The words in his epitaph. A grim, slow song plays. This is goodbye notes, with a description that reads, "Short loop that plays in a letter from when another player quits the game." The image fades into an in-game screenshot with the following text. "Dear James, it is time for me to go. I am sorry I never told you, but it's going to be okay. We will see each other soon. From Noah." It then fades into a photo of David in a room with a red bed, a blue bed, and a phone. The rest of the description states, "My brother quit playing the game yesterday and I got this fucked up letter sounding like he was going to run away. When I asked him about it, he freaked out, insisting he didn't write it. I tried to press him on what happened and he just started to break down saying he was going to hell over and over again. This is probably the most confusing piece of the puzzle, but bear with me. We have never seen or heard anything about these two characters, neither Noah, the author of the note, nor James, the recipient, or how they relate to David. Based on the description, I would say that James is Noah's older brother based on the use of profanity, and as he mentioned, Noah claims to have not written the letter but still thought he was going to hell. Based on this last statement and the description saying, "Short loop that plays in a letter when another player quits the game," there is an interesting parallel to be made here. While David's story is about a boy who died and was taken to heaven, Noah's is about a boy who was dragged into hell, which is what we initially assumed to have been David's fate. Noah was so disturbed by the experience that he quit the game altogether, to which the game responded by eliminating his player from the save file entirely, leaving an automated letter for the other players behind. I like to imagine that Noah might have ascended to heaven too, but he was so horrified by the means in which he got there that he shut the game off, causing Bell the priest to scold him severely, similarly to how Mr. Rossetti does, threatening him with the concept of hell and eternal damnation for not saving his game after entering the kingdom of the Lord, or something like that. Either way, this left Noah extremely paranoid about his mortality in real life. So, how does this tie back to David? In my head, these three people might as well be brothers, but why are there only two beds then? Are these Noah's and James's bed? If so, where's David's? Is David simply witnessing another abandoned home? Or is David's middle name James? Even after writing the script, I'm still not sure. The next video is also titled Goodbye Note, and that is most likely a prequel to the first one. This video uses an extremely similar format to that of the Untitled video, where David was the protagonist. However, as you're about to see, this is about Noah's side story. The track itself is a sped up version of Ascension, and it contains the text "I don't wanna go" over and over again, drawing an obvious parallel to David's mental breakdown while ascending, with the quote appearing faster and faster as the video goes on until the 50-second mark. We hear the same microphone static from the third player grave video, meaning the same prompt appeared on Noah's playthrough. This is where the words "I am going to hell" are uttered. The player's grave sound effect plays, cementing these as his final words. Like I mentioned, this whole video seeks to draw a parallel to David's "I don't want to go to heaven" quote. However, as we watched in the previous video, Noah was paranoid about going to hell, making this a sort of POV explanation as to when and why these fears started. The description reads, "I asked for him to draw where the church was on our map. I watched him draw the lines only to be unable to relocate where it was after I looked away." We can be fairly certain that James is responsible for writing the description once again. As to why Noah wouldn't be able to pinpoint the exact location of the church is completely beyond me. If I had to guess, I would say that this whole experience was so surreal and feverish that Noah's brain was better off suppressing it. The player grave video was updated for a fourth time. Same bio, same title, same obituary. David suddenly turns his head and looks at us, with his final words being, "I don't want to go to heaven, as present as ever," until... "Don't, it's too bright up here, I don't want to be here, I want to go home, don't leave me, it is so lonely up here." At the 1 minute and 20-second mark, the text briefly asks for just a few more minutes, before solemnly returning to "I don't want to go to heaven." A boy who's afraid of death is living an eternal nightmare, one he can never wake up from. Confirming all of our suspicions, David indeed went to heaven, but he didn't like it. Imagine spending an eternity in a place you fear horribly. Earlier in the ARG, David asked, "Why is there nobody else here?" Which we initially interpreted as David feeling scared about the growing number of villager disappearances, when in reality, he was referring to the eternal solitude of an empty wasteland known as heaven. Really try to picture this and you'll see how horrifying the idea of being trapped in an empty paradise for the rest of existence really is. But if David ended up in heaven, why did the nightly visitor take him in such a gruesome way? We'll talk about it soon enough. The next video is titled White Fog SFX, being a compilation of in-game sound effects. The description says, "A step up from the normal fog, replaces music in-game." The first part of the video shows us stage 1 of the fog. We see a screenshot displaying a very thick white fog on screen, as well as a girl character who we haven't seen before. This will make sense later. When I first watched this video, I assumed this had to be a picture of heaven, given the windy noises and presumed silence. However, the next image in the slideshow might reveal this is Earth. On stage 2, we see a similar photo, a winter-like setting and another player wearing a cap, as well as a very faint image of Ruby, a rabbit villager who can be seen in the background. If we were seeing another probably living creature, we could assume that the fog SFX is a form of ambience that plays the more villagers ascend to heaven and leave the town empty. The less villagers there are, the thicker the fog gets. It is worth noting that Ruby does appear in the box art that has been featured multiple times through the course of this ARG. What this could mean, I don't know. Stage 3 is denominated to be a hoax. The fog is thicker, and the player in the center of the screenshot's eyes are wide open, with the left one appearing to be bruised. I have tried to keep in mind the dates that are shown through the course of the series, and none of them have been worth mentioning with the exception of this one. The date on the screenshot marks March 28th, which is almost a week later after the goodbye note incident. I don't think any other screenshot happened in such a close proximity to this event, meaning that out of any of the player models shown in this video, the bruised villager has the highest probability of being Noah or James. At the very end, the text "Hi Forum" is shown on screen. This line reveals a lot of interesting things. First, it explains why there are so many player models in this video that we haven't seen before. Before this compilation, we only got to see David's. It also implies that the in-universe author of this video is completely disconnected from David, Noah, or James, as this SFX compilation is formatted completely different to anything we've seen before, especially considering the channel has never addressed anyone as Forum before. Maybe the person posting to the Sepiatone channel is documenting online findings of these bizarre events, as opposed to them being first-hand experiences. That's why we see videos like Church/Midnight Ceremony which have differences in their titles. Sepiatone would have found an online archive of the track, and due to their own research, considered that a different title was more appropriate. The next video is also titled White Fog SFX, with the same description and title, but the wind is even more intense and aggressive. It is even reminiscent to that of train whistles. Could this be the fourth stage of the fog, where it has completely enveloped an empty world? 36 seconds in, the howling sounds like a scream. The following video has no description, and it is titled Waterfall Dungeon. This is the fabled tutorial we have been waiting for since the end of the Waterfall room track, which abruptly ended before showing us a step-by-step guide on how to access it. This video was also most likely archived from the previously mentioned forum due to the similarities shared with the White Fog SFX video's format. At the end of the video, the message "Thanks for watching" is displayed, which means that there is an intended audience here, aka the users of the forum. This video starts off with silly music. How to get into the waterfall room in Animal Crossing Wild World, very reminiscent of old YouTube. The first step is to hit a rock until you hear this jingle. That being the same one we hear in the player grave videos or when Noah's final words are transcribed. Meaning that one of the theories I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that the waterfall room might be a sort of secret Pandora's box, could be correct, as we're seeing direct ties with death and the waterfall room. Therefore, we could assume that the disturbing events that take place in Wild World happen once the player accesses the waterfall room for the first time, almost as if entering it led to a secret, alternative route of the game. Try at least 10 times before moving on to the next rock. Only one rock in your town can play this noise right now. Step 2 says, find 3 more rocks that play this jingle. 3 more rocks should play this jingle the first time. If the rock you hit doesn't play the jingle, you'll have to go back to the first rock again. Step 3. After hitting all 4 rocks, go to the waterfall. There will be a pathway to the inside. Jump across the rocks and into the waterfall. No buttons, just walk towards it. Step 4. you have found the Waterfall room. We can see a player standing in a room covered in water, with a bright light in the middle and the crescent moon statue. There's not much here to do, but it is a cool spot. There's a dungeon, but I haven't figured out how to get in yet. Thanks for watching. So, what even is this room? It is unlike anything we've seen before, not related to the church, the graveyard, or heaven. The only thing I could think of is that the moon could probably have a symbolic connection to the nightly visitor, as, you know, the moon is present in the nighttime, but it feels like a reach. This waterfall room, dungeon, temple thing is still a mystery even after writing the script. Player grave changed once again, making all the previous versions unavailable. The horror in this series is so good that even a picture of the sky can be unnerving and chilling given the context. This picture of the sky is enough proof to be certain that David did indeed end up in heaven. At this moment, we are not sure if David the character or David the human died during childhood. I'd say that either of these scenarios is already a huge loss. His character died, and there's nothing he could have done about it. Imagine how badly this experience would damage a child's psyche. The music picks up and gets more optimistic. It's reminiscent to the final hour track. Only to go silent, and then... The player grave video got updated for one last time. The description has a whole different note saying, "Thank you for mourning." You're in hell. You all are. It is an angel. He told me I was in hell. You're lying. Nobody remembers me. Don't cry. He'll forget you too. The video fades and we briefly get a glimpse of the sky. This is the truth of the nightly visitor. It is not just some monster, it is an angel of death. Something lurking so close to your back, you're better off pretending it's not even there. But why would it try to deceive David and tell him he was going to hell when he was actually in heaven? I don't know, but what I do see are some heavy parallels to the myth of the Passover. The Passover is an event in the Old Testament of the Bible, more specifically on Exodus chapter 12. The Hebrews were enslaved by the rulers of Egypt for generations, and after trying to negotiate their freedom and failing, and after 9 plagues, the Hebrew people received divine instructions to splatter lamb's blood on the doors of their houses, as God himself, or alternatively, an angel of death, would pass over every home in Egypt. Any door left unmarked would allow the angel to enter the home and slaughter the firstborn child of a family. Since the Hebrews were the only ones to receive these instructions, only the Egyptians were affected. The death of these children caused such a stir that would kick off the events for the Hebrews to escape from Egypt to find their promised land. The Passover is actually one of Judaism's most important holidays to this day. I believe the nightly visitor serves a similar purpose. Whether it is an agent of God, an agent of Bel, or the personification of death itself, we don't really know. But as you're about to see, the nightly visitor's modus operandi is eerily similar to that of the angel of death from the Passover. For the first time, we see actual gameplay, an encounter with the nightly visitor. We're introduced to a player. This is not David, but he looks very similar to the bruised villager from the White Fog SFX video, whom we have already concluded to be either Noah or James. We also see the same room present in the Goodbye Note video. One of the beds, however, is now colored grey rather than blue. To not run around circles, I will declare that this is David's home, and you will soon see why. If one bed belonged to Noah and the other one belonged to David, then you'd naturally assume that the grayed out bed belongs to David, as he has already died. But I think this video might have taken place before the Goodbye Note video, with this being a literal POV for the reason that Noah quit the game, meaning that the gray bed actually belongs to Noah. And he has been selected by the nightly visitor. Hi, Astrei from the future again. Now that I'm rewatching the episode, I found something I completely missed. At the very beginning, Noah is seen interacting with the red bed, and a text box appears that says you can't move either. I don't know if by move it refers to move to a different house or to physically move, but the either implies that someone else wasn't able to move before, which will make sense in just a second. Noah leaves the room and reveals that for some reason the downstairs floor of the house is nothing other than the waterfall room. Why does David's house have access to such a significant place directly from their home? This room clearly has some form of religious significance, given that the jingle is associated with both the waterfall room and salvation. Noah walks to the main room of the house, revealing a picture of Lucky, David's favorite villager, which reveals that everything we are currently looking at once belonged to David. It also contains Belle's photo, indicating that David indeed had achieved a deep bond with Belle, which could imply that my previous theory of David becoming a high-ranking member of the church to be true. Noah tries to leave the house only to be teleported right back into it, almost as if he was trapped. The waterfall jingle, funnily enough, can be heard again. Noah gets a phone call. Upon heading upstairs, an ominous sound is heard coming from the waterfall room. After entering, the video begins to get glitchy. The phone call was from the Fairway Service Center, which by the way is the name of David's town, confirming that this is his home. Noah hangs up the phone, but it keeps ringing. Once he's downstairs again, the house is completely empty. And the waterfall jingle again. With the phone still ringing, Noah tries to leave David's house, but once again re-enters it as if he was stuck in a loop. The phone is picked up by Lucky, explaining they can't attend the phone right now. He tries to leave again and is unable to. We hear a loud banging noise, which repeats gradually. We hear loud, distorted noises, similar to the ones in Ascension, Untitled, or Game Over. The player is stuck in an inescapable loop trying to run but just can't. We hear the jingle over and over and over again. 2 minutes and 58 seconds in, we hear some sort of muffled, exhaling scream. When the game unfreezes, we see a very disturbing face, which appears to be a clown or a child. And when the sound stops, we see the ominous yellow background from the player grave video. I turned around and saw an angel. The video ends. The description of the video says, "Note, what is the nightly visitor?" The nightly visitor is essentially the Brutus of Animal Crossing Wild World.
Brutus being an evil villager who would corrupt your town. It's one of the oldest, I would say, urban legends from the Animal Crossing community.
A figure rumored to hide in the shadows, taking the form of animals in your town. It is said to visit your town from around 11 PM to 4 AM, roaming near the graveyard. On rare occasions, the nightly visitor may enter your house and rearrange the furniture in your living room. If the nightly visitor catches you, you will receive the highly elusive Game Over screen, but also lose all of your progress. No dialogue in the game has ever been found to acknowledge its existence, let alone the graveyard it resides in. Despite the rumors, the nightly visitor doesn't kill you in real life. This is an urban legend perpetrated by others who are obviously still alive to post about it. This is why Noah fears hell. This is the moment the nightly visitor caught him, an angel that is known to lie about its purpose. Its horrifying appearance and disturbing entrance scarred Noah for life, and with its claims of taking Noah to hell, the kid naturally developed an aversion to it. He would later quit the game, leading to the goodbye note duology. This is Nightly Visitor SFX, where the description is essential to know before watching this video. I'd like to break this fake character I've been playing into for these descriptions to avoid my confusion about this entire thing. These past few months I've been obsessively scrounging up as much info as I can, and it's only left me more and more confused. There was more than one person behind this stuff. It is an entire community of people doing one big inside joke, and it actually kinda weirds me out how nobody's ever talked about it. I personally thought the Nightly Visitor was some kind of cosmic entity character, but these people kinda just mention it like it was a feature. Like, yeah, he's just a part of the game where you can die. Also, there's an evil monster that kills people. It's not just one thing either. It would make sense if it was just another weird inside joke that didn't take off. But it's like they've been playing an entirely different game. I mean, like, in-depth, pages long strategy guides on shit like Waterfall Dungeon Level 5, Halloween Furniture Guide, Successful Villager Prayers, How to Escape the Visitor. There's just countless discussions about these features that don't exist, and nobody calls them out. It's really late for me, and I'll probably share more tomorrow when my head's on straight. Thank you for being patient. This note reveals what I was really curious about: who the author of these videos is. The uploader is just as intrigued and confused as we are. Why are there so many players in this forum playing this morbid version of Animal Crossing and act as if it was normal in any way, shape or form? With this revelation, we can probably assume that the poster is not related to Noah, David or James at all. So, now with the video. Animal Crossing Wild World. Nightly Visitor SFX. What is the Nightly Visitor? The Nightly Visitor is a monster that can visit your house from 11 PM to 4 AM. It can rearrange the furniture in your house and kill you. These are some of the sound effects I found. These are all very loud and kind of hard to listen to, so I will not be playing them in their entirety to spare your ears and to save time. Just know that all of these are sounds you've heard in these videos before. They are mumbles, banging noises, and more. With the exception of Disappear. I don't think we've heard this one in the channel before. Could it mean this is what happens when the player successfully defeats the Nightly Visitor? This sound effect stays silent until the 2-minute and 12-second mark, where we can hear whatever this is. 2 minutes and 23 seconds in, it becomes low quality screaming that gets obscured by static. The ARG has come to its end. The video's title is completely blank. It is very low quality and there's no description for it either. There is something you might have missed, but the picture we see of Noah 7 is different to that of David's, which makes me think that the cult that Bell runs might be praying with the purpose of each of its members to be granted their own individual heavens, similarly to how Scientology promises its believers they'll get their own planets. David and Noah are dead and stuck in 2 different heavens. That's why, even at death, their thanatophobia will keep isolating them forever. The real-life parallels of Noah and David are probably 2 severely scarred kids now, with a deep fear of not only dying, but are now unable to live because of it. Oh yeah, there's also like 3 bonus videos, I guess. They are not that important, so I will just give you a general gist of them. A video called Jingle, which is the Waterfall room jingle playing repeatedly. Full audio, it is very scary and it made me shit myself. Obscure OST update video, which has Sepiatone actually talking, where they mention they have lost access to all of the videos they have archived, which is the reason as to why everything is unlisted now. Oh yeah, and it also ends with them fucking dying to the Nightly Visitor.
I don't know what this is. I don't know what just happened.
And finally, an Animal Crossing Let's Play update video, where Sepiatone mentions they are burnt out on their Animal Crossing daily series, and will have to stop posting them for a while. These videos aren't even up on the channel, meaning that the mystery might not be over yet. This has been a long trip, We have analyzed the entirety of the obscure Wild World OST, so this is Astray's best attempt at explaining the chronology of everything you've just watched. The year is 2023. An Animal Crossing player finds an old Wild World forum from the 2000s, where they found some interesting, albeit eerie tracks that they have never heard before. However, the further they explored this forum, the more deranged things got. They found an entire community of people who have seemed to have grown up playing a completely different version of Animal Crossing Wild World. Initially, this user starts compiling songs from the obscure version of the OST, but the further they went through the rabbit hole, they stumbled upon some witnesses who were traumatized firsthand by these events. The user found a series of posts made by someone who called himself James, who recapped the story of his younger brothers, David and Noah. David was a kid like many others. He started getting involved in a web of mysteries in his Wild World town. A secret dungeon hidden behind a waterfall, church services he wasn't allowed to join, his villagers disappearing gradually, and the monster lurking at every corner at night. The more David looked into these myths, the more he found links to the church. Bell was a ram priest who seemed to have a fascination and connection to death, embracing it at every corner, trying to contact those from beyond and possibly performing some extremely morbid rituals late at night. David was not able to access these through normal means, so he had to blend with the crowd. He started attending church out of curiosity, but the more he did, the more insane this town started to become. Illness, death, fog. All of these issues were liberated as if we were talking about Pandora's box right after entering a strange temple-like dungeon hidden behind a waterfall. This innocent game had become a morbid love letter to death. The church he joined out of curiosity eventually became his sanctuary. He saw more and more villagers disappearing, Tom Nook's shop closing down, and the only thing he could do was pray. Pray he was not going to be the next one to go. He felt like he only had himself, Belle, and the church. Imagine the horror he felt. So he started questioning things like death, defiling graveyards, and the fear of isolation. David had gradually become more religious in both real life and in-game, praying for salvation, to the point where he had become a high-ranking member of the church and befriending Belle. At some point, all of the villagers were gone. Yet, God still had not accepted him, paradoxically praying to be the next one to ascend so he wouldn't have to face this unbearable earthly solitude without wanting to die. But none of this even mattered, as the nightly visitor caught him first, an angel of death ready to take him. The beast was already in his home. He tried to escape, but you cannot cheat death. And just like that, he committed his worst mistake. He turned around and saw this thing. Without any mercy, the beast murdered him. He had no choice. He did not want to go to heaven. His soul was now in a dilemma. The angel made him believe that he was in hell. He couldn't see as it was too bright. It burned his eyes. Only the deepest bits of hell's flames could be this blinding. But he then realized he was in heaven. He did it. All of his prayers and strange favors that Belle asked him to partake in had paid off. But now, he was dead. He could never feel earthly pleasures again. No more conversations with Lucky. No more playing with his brothers. No more hugs and kisses from Mom. He frantically looked for the rest of the ascended villagers, yet he was completely alone. On the other hand, his brother Noah also lived in Fairway, as they shared a save file, with their older brother James occasionally dropping by. Noah would go through a very similar experience like what David went through, but being much younger, he did not have the mental capacity to come to the conclusion that the nightly visitor was an angel who had taken him to heaven. Rather, he believed his lie of being in hell. He rapidly quit the game and his save file got corrupted, leaving a note behind as if he was about to run away in real life. It was almost like the game wanted that to happen. Both brothers would have grown up to be more withdrawn, with the heavy burden in their shoulders of knowing they would die someday, and that it was a matter of time before they'd be stuck in eternity too. James, naturally, seeing the sight of his youngest brother in absolute shock, he tried to get him to talk. "I don't want to go to hell," he would repeat back and forth, which is when he saw the goodbye note on his DS. The user was horrified to see how any of these contents were even possible to have been approved by Nintendo. So they kept looking and looking. They found more forum posts and tutorials of people talking about even stranger and more morbid rituals as if this was completely normal. Would owning a copy of this cursed game be a bad omen? Holding one seemed to open the doors to the unknown. This is why I loved this ARG. It shows you how claustrophobic the fears of death, heaven, and eternity can be. The way I've looked at it ever since I was a child has been simple. No horror movie could ever be as scary as death. Death is the most disturbing and depressing scary thought you could ever think of. An endless stay in oblivion. Alone, without feeling, thinking, or breathing. Simply not existing. Every person who has seen death has never been able to come back and tell us what they saw. It is the only thing that every living thing in the universe has for certain. Death is inevitable. I think there are many ways of interpreting the ARG, and there are still many questions left unanswered. What is the correct timeline? What is the Waterfall dungeon? What was the strange photo we saw in the nightly visitor attack? I have no answers to these questions, so I would love to hear what you guys think. Even without the answers to these questions, I have two theories as to what this series is trying to communicate to the viewer. This series serves as a good way of calling out toxic religious operations and how cults thrive off lonely, isolated people. The way these cults work is by fear-mongering its believers and selling them the cure to a problem they created. In this case, maybe a cult altered an Animal Crossing save file to indoctrinate players from a young age. That's why the note that Noah left behind is so scary to think about. In the case where he actually wrote it, he was ready to leave everything behind for a cult. The concept of religions and cults as tools for control of the masses is very nuanced, difficult, and I'm not nearly qualified enough to talk about it effectively. But as someone who isn't religious but adores and heavily respects theology, I find it insane how cults and extremist religious sects still thrive in our current day and age. Some horrifying beliefs and practices are being kept alive and propagated through the world via people who are scared to call out these toxic religious environments. Take a look at how bad the cult epidemic in Korea is at the moment. People claiming to be the reincarnation of prophets just for monetary gain, or how many real-world tragedies have happened because death cults have pushed innocent people to die. Cults work because they make a person isolate themselves from the world and willingly saw off their relationships with everyone else. It truly is tragic. Alternatively, and as I have discussed enough in this ARG, the Wild World OST shows us thanatophobia from the eyes of a clueless child. I know you don't want me to continue monologuing about my own thanatophobia, but getting to watch an ARG like this, despite being very difficult to do, made me feel less alone in this world. Even if I had a really bad panic attack while writing the script for this video. This is by far the longest video I have ever made, so if you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with a friend. I really appreciate that you stuck with me for whatever the length of this video is. I am genuinely really thankful for your time and attention. Please leave your theories and thoughts in the comment section down below, and if there's any other ARGs or topics you would like me to cover, just let me know. I also want to thank you for the support. We have officially hit 5,200 subscribers, which is a massive milestone, and I really wanted to celebrate it with something silly like a Q&A video or a 50 facts about me special. So yeah, that's about it. Make sure to stay hydrated, eat some veggies, and lock your door so the nightly visitor doesn't come and do the funny to your mama. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.